Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Before we begin the show, a quick word from my friend, Jules Hannaford.
Hong Kong Confidential, a podcast with Jules Hannaford, is designed to educate and entertain my audience. It's an interview-style show where many topical social issues are discussed and personal stories are shared. The podcast can be inspiring, confronting, harrowing, and at times hilarious. All of the stories have uplifting messages. We all need to be heard to heal, and listening to the experiences of others can often help the rest of us deal with whatever life has to throw at us. Find Hong Kong Confidential on Ozcast Network at www.ozcastnetwork.com. Hong Kong Confidential is also available on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher and YouTube, and anywhere that you can find your podcasts. Check out Hong Kong Confidential today.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. Today, my guest is Nina Schluntz, author of Enukara 3. The third book. She's on the third book. It's the first generation. She's an author that hails from Nebraska, and she moved from corn to peaches, believe it or not. Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle, Nina. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm good.
The first thing I saw when I was looking at your book title, it says Enukara. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
And the first thing that came to my mind was the Anunnaki when I saw Enukara. Is there any correlation between those two?
I don't think so, because I'm not sure what that is.
So the Anunnaki were supposedly the beings that came to the planet that helped to cultivate man and bring the plow.
Huh.
So they were giant beings. So the Anunnaki were supposed to be like anywhere from 10 to like 25 feet tall. And they were supposed to take man from supposedly what we were in this pre-man state to the Homo sapien we are today and bring forth technologies. I mean, it's very similar spelling, so I was just wondering if that was the same thing. But let's digress a little bit.
Well, no, that's a creative spin because, yeah, this is about aliens coming to Earth and doing an invasion. So that actually fits well.
Yeah. So that's what, maybe it was divinely inspired by the universe to bring all this together.
Maybe I'd heard that somewhere and yeah, it stuck.
So let me go back. This is the third book. Let's talk about how you came to being with the series itself. So how did this come to be? Was this something that was resident in you from a childhood? You just had these stories in you, or you had these entities that you wanted to bring out and bring to life? How did that come about?
Sorry. I have over a dozen books out. So these are no longer, like the first couple I wrote, yeah, they were off of characters I may have developed as a kid. But I've moved past that now, so these no longer in that area. But so mostly now it's picking from other things that inspire me to come up. Like these are dragons that come to Earth and invade. And, you know, everybody loves dragons. And what inspired these was I read a book about shape-shifting dragons, but it was really focused heavy on the erotica aspect.
Yeah, my wife's into those.
And I felt like the author was limiting themselves in their audience because they were so heavy in that. Like other people would have enjoyed these if they'd toned that down. So when I started these, that was my goal. And of course, as I'm writing it, there was one scene where I was like, okay, these characters have chemistry. And I had to go there too. So mine ended up being a romance as well. But I still kept it enough other aspects in the book that people who don't normally read romance or eroticas still read these and get enjoyment.
Yeah, so
that's not the focus.
So who's your demographic for this? Because I know I'm familiar with this because I speak to my wife, and she was enthralled with these books where there were these vampires and there were these witches, but it was erotica, and it just had her enraptured. Otherwise, she would not delve into the sci-fi or the mystical as far as that realm, unless the romance. Did you try to craft this so that you could appeal to a feminine and masculine audience?
To a degree, yes. One aspect is there's not just man-woman romance in these. There's also man-man romance. So it opens me up to a more unique audience.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're writing romances, there's a lot of competition out there. And then when you throw the science fiction and the fantasy, but when you throw in the aspect of it being a gay romance, that makes you stand out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it helps. And then it's a unique aspect as far as the promotion goes. But again, that's not the whole focus. So just because you don't normally read that kind of book doesn't mean you won't enjoy this one.
Awesome.
So yeah. And I found too that women are still the target audience for that genre of book. Like regardless of whether it's a man-woman, man-man, it's still your women who stay home that enjoy reading those. So it didn't change the target audience too much.
Yeah, you know what? I find it that predominantly women read far more than men, at least 2 to 5 to 1. You know,
Yeah.
when I talk to my male colleagues, hey man, I'm reading this book, and they're like, huh? They're like, is it a manual? I'm like, no, it's a fiction book. And they're like, what? What's that? Or I say, oh yeah, I've seen this movie before. And they're like, how did you see this movie? I was like, I read the book. And they're like, what? So when you were thinking about becoming a literary artist, what was your process? Before you even published your first book, what went through your mind? What was your process for saying, I am going to commit to this and I'm going to make it happen? Because typically, writing is the part that's easy because the story's in you. But then you have to go to the business part, which is physically produce the book. So what was that like for you?
The actual sitting down and typing and writing it?
No, I'm talking about after you've gotten it typed and written, now the business part. Now I have to make the book. I have to edit it. I have to get artwork. Yeah. I have to make sure that my lines only have so much text, because if the sentence is too long in the page frame, it's unnatural. The gutter, all this stuff. Did you have an inkling of that? Did you have a background in that? Or was this a new process for you?
Yeah, it was all new. When I started off, I used, and this was back, the first book came out in 2004, not in this series, just my first book ever. And that was back when you still had to hire a in-between, like there wasn't Create Space yet. You had to hire an in-between, they call them like a vanity press or self-publishing. Yeah. And walking through their process taught me the steps of what they're looking for when they edit and the book covers. So, and then as it's become more popular now, I can look at people's blogs of how they did it.
Yeah.
And one key that I think makes my books different is, because, when you're editing, you have to read your own book over and over and over. And if I ever get bored in a part that I'm reading, I'm like, I'm just going to cut this.
Really?
So it needs to be entertaining enough that I can read it a dozen times and not get bored.
Wow.
I'm just like, nah.
That's awesome. I've never heard that particular take on it before, because most authors are very protective of all their writing.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that. But no, I'm all about, I'm the one, I'll get like 4 chapters in, and I'm like, this isn't working, and I'll just start over. Like, I have all kinds of, you'll see, if you look in my folders, I'm like on version 9, because I'll just delete a whole bunch and start, but you never like completely delete it. You just save it as a new draft. So if you need to go back and reference.
So who do you run your ideas by? Do you have a creative mentor, creative outlet, or creative partner who you can bounce ideas off of and say, does this work or does this make sense?
So I've found other people who think like me, like other creative writers, tend to headbutt. So I don't actually go to people like that. But I do have my husband. He's very much a realist. So I will ask him things like, will this work? And like I had a different book, but it was a unicorn that needed to jump across a river. And I asked him, I'm like, this is like a 20-foot wide river. I'm like, can a unicorn make that jump? And he was like, no, they could not. But then he'll also throw in but if you sprinkle it with magic, he's like, but he's like, no, that's not realistic. He's like, it's not going to make it. So he's my scientific reference. But then again, he'll sometimes just give up and say, sprinkle your magic on it, you're fine.
Yeah, that makes sense because is your husband a hunter or anything like that, or is he just a manly man?
No, he is an engineer. So he's just very much a scientific research kind of guy.
So he's like, just the facts, ma'am. That just does not make any logical sense. Okay, I understand now. Because I was thinking, when you said unicorn jump, I was thinking about what I've seen deer do in the forest.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen them literally jump. I've seen them jump over a 12-foot fence standing next to the fence.
Yep.
But we're digressing again. We're just getting into conversation. But this is what it's about, because when you interview people, I want to know who they are. I want to know what their process is. So here's the next question. When you got to book 1, when you were halfway through it, did you already know that there was book 2 and book 3 that were inside you that needed to flow out? Or was this a thought after everything was done with book 1? You said to yourself, there's more to this story.
So it started off as just supposed to be one book because I was in a very much a standalone novel kick. Like all my books were just one book.
Yeah.
And this story, once I figured it out, because this took 2 years to write the first book because I kept trying different versions and rewrites. And when I finally got it going, it got longer and longer and longer. And I realized, I'm like, this is going to take me forever to edit because it's getting too long. I didn't want to end up with a book like, Stephen King's It. It's just huge.
Oh, my God.
No one's going to want to read this.
Oh, my God.
So I reached a point and I just stopped. And a lot of people, when they read that, they left reviews if they didn't like the ending because it was a cliffhanger. And I was like, well, would you prefer that, or do you want to read a really big book? So the first one basically got split into 2. And then after I did the 2, my publisher said, well, you really need to write a third one because that will make a series more stable as to at least do 3 instead of 2.
Got you.
So then I had to brainstorm, okay, what can I have happen next to keep this going? And this book, is number 3. And it introduced some new characters and shows you the initial dragon invasion. Because again, I listen to the feedback from my beta readers and I read the reviews people leave. Like after book 1, everyone was saying, I want more dragons. So book 2, you get more dragons. And then after book 2, everyone was like, I want to know how the initial invasion worked. So like, what's the background of these dragons? Why'd they come? So book 3, you get to go back to the first days of this and see how it came about.
So you did a prequel, basically.
Only partly. It goes back, but then it also continues with the main storyline.
So it's a reflection.
Yeah. You meet a new character who was here for the invasion, and then he's also here in the present with your characters from the first 2 books.
All right, so give me a quick synopsis of the book. We're in an elevator. I meet you, and I go, and because I'm literally like this, I go, hi, what's your name? I'm like a kindergartner. And I go, what do you do? And you say, I'm an author. And I go, ooh, have you written any books? And you say, yes. And then I say, what's the book about? What's the elevator speech for your book?
So, shape-shifting dragons, they come from space, come to Earth to invade and become immortal. And as time goes, they start falling in love, and it's all about the culture differences between humans and dragons and discovering their differences.
So the shape-shifting dragons can take on human form, or do they take on animal form as well?
So, yeah, they have a dragon form that's your stereotypical dragon, and then they can shift into a regular human-looking form.
How big are these dragons?
It depends how old they are, but yeah, they can get as big as a house. They're your...
Wow.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. When you were putting this together and you were thinking about the relationship aspect, particularly nowadays, when it comes to relationships between human beings, love is love. That I'll grant to you. But then when we bring in the aspect of sex and union as a couple, it's a dividing line in America about that. Were you worried that you were going to get any kind of backlash because of kind of same sex coupling?
Nope, because the publisher I go through with these that's their focus, is the male romance.
Yeah.
And so they market to that. And at first I was a little worried about like friends and family. I'm like, they may stop reading my books. I don't know if they're going to go for this. But no, it was actually surprising. People were, because, I'm from Nebraska. So they don't get exposed to as much as you do in bigger cities.
Oh, I understand that. I moved from Detroit to Indiana, and it was shocking.
Yep. So a lot of them actually were interested in my books because they were curious. So it was, I don't know if this was a smart thing or not, but they kind of use it as an educational tool. Like, I want to see how this works, you know? So I'm hoping I'm doing that realm, justice.
Yeah. And why didn't you self-publish? That's a really popular way to go for authors nowadays. How did you find a publicist or publisher for your books who takes on some of the duties that many people are taking on themselves nowadays?
Yeah, I've tried various ones. I think they're called Bouquet or publishers. They're just a smaller press.
Yeah.
And I did it so it would open me up to other avenues because they market to a certain audience. Like, they have followers already.
Yeah.
So it saves me a little bit of time, because I do agree with how things are set up now. Editing and the cover you can do yourself. It's if they help you with the promotion, that's really when you need a publisher.
So for the people, because you're the first person I'm going to talk to about this, about publishing, because many people self-publish their books, or they've created their own media company, so they're the publisher and they're well-versed in it.
And I've done both. I've done self-publish and with a publisher. Okay.
So with a publisher, what does a publisher bring to the table that someone else would be doing on their own? What would be the dividing line for you? Particularly because you have a very kind of a niche book. So that makes perfect sense. You found a crowd that it blends with. But what about other people who are wondering, should I get a publisher or publish myself?
The publisher will help you figure out what you should be doing. Because, long term, I will probably branch off and go back to self-publishing so I can control things myself. But like with this publisher, they send my book through all the different editors, the proof editor, a line editor, a content editor. And as someone who's brand new to it, it teaches you, okay, I need all those things. Instead of someone that's just, I need one editor and they'll do everything.
Yeah.
And then the cover, it's like shows you how the cover should look. because it has to be eye appealing. You have to be able to see it as a thumbnail size. And your average person may not realize all those aspects that go into it.
And the reason I'm asking you this is because a lot of people don't understand how difficult or the process, it's kind of like music business, except this is book business. You think you just put a song out and everybody goes, yay! But there's a lot of behind the scenes work, and particularly because you've had 3 or more books put out, that's a lot of work that goes into it. And depending on where your mindset is as an author, might depend where you go for publishing.
Yep.
And
it gets you to slow down too, because if you self-publish, you can write up your first draft and publish it in a week.
Yeah.
But going through a publisher, they force you to slow down, so it now takes 4 or 6 months, depending who you go through, to get that book out, which is much more realistic. Like, you should sit the book aside for a while and then read it, and you'll find more mistakes.
Cool. So are you appearing anywhere? Are you doing any book readings? Are you doing anything online? Or do you have any groups that you belong to that the Billionaire Lifestyle audience can find you, or at least maybe come see you?
Not in person. My publisher does go to some conventions, so my books will be at some of those. They're going to I think it's the GRL conference that's coming up this fall. And that's a gay romance love, something like that stands for. And the publisher actually promotes that. The publisher is ManLoveRomance, MLR.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that makes sense.
since I've mentioned them so much, I should throw their name out there.
Right?
But yeah, my name, and you'll pop up all of the medias I'm on, and then Meisner13, that'll get you my Twitter and various websites.
Let's talk about your name again, because how it sounds and how it's spelled are 2 different things. The pronunciation is, say it.
Schluntz.
The spelling is
SCHLUNTZ. I usually say people can either spell it or they can say it. Very rare can someone do both.
But the reason I'm saying this is so that people will know how to find you. You could come to the Billionaire Lifestyle and there'll be a little post on there about, directing you to your works. But in the interim, someone just may want to Google, because a lot of times people listen to podcasts in their car or they're jogging at work, and they're okay. And they come in and try SLONS.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure. What about your Facebook? Do you have a Facebook group, or are you a part of any groups or anything where people can ingratiate themselves?
Yep, I have my regular Facebook that people can follow. That's just my name. And then I also have one that's just for the books. So it's called Decomposed Series and Other Books by Nina Schluntz. Because the Decomposed Series was my first books that I came out with.
All right, so let's do this. Let's go to the first book in the series. The synopsis of the first book was... I gotcha.
I know you did. Okay, so the first book is where the Dragon King falls for one of the humans.
Okay, that's book 1.
Yes.
Book 2, number 2 is...
continuation of that story and how the Dragon King evolves and decides to start more coexisting with the humans.
Awesome. Book 3, Tres, is...
Goes back and shows you the history of the initial dragon invasion, and you meet some of the original dragons.
Awesome. Book 4...
Book 4, that actually introduces dragon mages, so you get more magic.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
When will that... Is that in the works?
That has been written, and it is in editing. I'm hoping for September publication date.
Where can people get your book?
Amazon is the common one. Otherwise, you have to go direct to the MLR Press website. But yeah, they're on Amazon as Kindle and paperback.
Do you have Barnes & Noble as well, or any other publishing selling houses?
I'm not sure if my publisher puts them out on the Nook or not. They might.
Okay. So what was the process for you making the books into the various modalities? So, you have to get a copyright for each item that you present. So if you do an audiobook, are you doing an audiobook?
Occasionally my publisher does do them, but I don't think I've hit the sales yet.
Okay.
That has put me in that category of they'll do an audiobook.
Okay.
But they do happen.
So you have to get the mechanical rights for every item that you publish. So if that is a hardcover book, that's one mechanical right. If it's a softcover book, that's a different mechanical right. If it's Nook or Kindle, those are other mechanical rights. What diaspora have you covered with that? Was it just for the softcover book and the e-reader book?
Yeah, just the two.
Now, if there's one thing that you could say to the Billionaire Lifestyle audience about your books, what would you say?
If you want to read about dragons and romance, these are the books for you.
Awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast, by the way.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to the 5th book, so that way, it's kind of like when you binge watch. Like, I'm coming up on the TV show Power. I don't watch much TV or television, but Power, whoa. So it's coming out July 1st, and I can't binge watch it, which sucks. But wait for that 5th book, but get all 3 books in the series before you go out. I have to ask you one last question, or second to the last question. What were the books prior to the series that you produced?
So my first books were about Decompose, which was like a monster and a plague zombie style. And that was back before zombies were super popular. So there were original 3 books, and then I rewrote them into 1 because as I grew as an author, I realized those were written horribly. and then I did 3 new, so total of like 7 books in that series. But again, those first 3 got put into 1.
Yeah.
And then I've had 3 standalone romance books, really focusing on the male aspect. And 2 of those were contemporary, and then 1 with ghosts. And now we're on to the dragons.
This may be an uncomfortable question, but a theme still pops up. What is with the male in your psyche to bring out to write about that? How did that come to being?
It all started because one thing I do to try to figure out what people are into is when I hear about a book that's super popular and everyone's reading it, I was like, okay, I need to read this book and see why everyone loves it. Mm-hmm. So that got me starting to read the romance. Like, I never read romances as a kid or anything. So I started reading the Twilight books, the 50 Shade books, and then other little like 99-cent romance books you can get,
Yeah.
And it started getting me and all this. And eventually that kind of searching guided me into, I got to the point where I was reading the ones where it's like a woman and some weird demon monster romance.
That was my wife, yes.
Like, it just keeps going. There's all kinds out there. And eventually I read one that was, 2 men or 2 women, or 3 people. And that's where I was like, there's a lot of these that haven't been explored yet. Like, I think my first one was inspired when I read a book that was, 2 men, but it was, the man was in an abusive relationship, and it was him getting out of that and getting his happy ending. Like, he met someone else that was better for him. And I was like, well, what about the guy that was the abuser? Why doesn't he get a happy ending? Yeah. I was like, so my first romance that I wrote was from the person who's abusive and has a temper, finding someone who copes with that and helps him become less abusive. Like, it's not, okay, now he found a guy that lets him beat on him, but it's finding someone who doesn't do all those triggers that makes him get angry. So, and that was
that's
Kale's Paroxysm. And go ahead.
That's some deep psychology. I mean, that's some deep. That's the reason I'm saying that's some deep psychology is because you have to put yourself in the mindset effectively. If you do it effectively, you have to put yourself in the mindset of all those characters and see it from their point of view, which is really difficult because most human beings can't even see from anyone around them their point of view. You know, I was just having this discussion that we need to look at the world through the other person's eyes before we get so judgmental, because you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what has caused them to be who they are today, because we are the result of our experiences. It shapes our personality, and people just don't seem to get that. And you are doing it and putting it in literary works all inside of your Trinity, which is your mind, body, and soul, and which is I'm finding awesome right now just thinking about this. All right. You got to do the exercise that we do on the Billionaire Lifestyle podcast. You ready?
Uh-oh, I didn't see this.
See, this is what happens. You got it. See? I got you. Close your eyes.
Okay.
You're sitting at home. Your husband's gone. No kids around. No family around. Nobody. You're just chilling on your couch. And you probably got your favorite beverage that relaxes you or something that relaxes you. And you're just ready to chill out. Just listen to the quiet. And the doorbell rings. And then you get up and go to the door. You open the door. I want you to picture this now. You open the door. And there sits the 18-year-old you. And she says, you know, I come here to ask you one question. And that question is, what do I need to navigate this life a little easier?
Educate yourself and don't be afraid to talk to people and learn from them.
Awesome. So very awesome. Okay, you can open your eyes now.
Okay. Because I grew up on the farm, so I was very shy as a kid and growing up, and it took me a long time to start conversing more with people. So,
see, very good. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. You know how we end it. Remember this, when you get near a mirror, I want you to take some time. It could be in your car, but if you're driving, don't do this. But I want you to just look in the mirror. You know, I often say do it when you get out the shower so that you're in the suit that God gave you. And the reason I want you to do this is because I find that people don't really appreciate themselves in the most supportive way that they should. I want you to realize just how special you are. I mean, I just talked to a young lady who's really created a different universe just from her soul and her mind. That lets you know how powerful we are. So when you get next to that mirror, I want you to take some time with yourself and look in the mirror. And I want you to look at the nose that brings air, which brings life from this planet into your body. And then on either side of your nose, there are two irises, which represent galaxies. As above, so below. Everything is fractal, which means you are part of the omniverse, not the universe, the omniverse. And I'm going to tell it to you like this. If you don't think you're loved and you don't think you're special, I'm going to put it to you like this. After your mom and your dad met, 30 days after that miracle happened, you were a billionaire, because 2 to the power of 30 will give you $1 billion. Be loved, treat others like you want to be treated, and be peaceful. Peace.